or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jean, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, May 31st, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Space aplenty to stage vampire attacks. A three-tiered set that includes a freight elevator does the trick for the stars of The Lost Boys by Michael Paulson. The first vampire descends from the shadows high above the stage, barely visible as he comes in for the kill. 4 vampires disappear into a dark void below the stage after dropping, one by one, from a trestle bridge. In The Lost Boys, a new musical based on the 1987 film, spectacle abounds. It is being staged in a Broadway house with an only-in-New-York real estate story. After a century on the ground, the Palace Theater was hoisted 30 feet in the air to make room for street-level development. That project led to an unusual amount of space below the stage, and The Lost Boys is the first show to demonstrate the stagecraft potential offered by the theater's height and depth since the building reopened in 2024. We wanted the space to feel incredibly cavernous, and we were interested in playing with vertical space, said Michael Arden, the show's Tony-nominated director. We're used to things coming on from stage left and stage right, but we wanted to deliver things from above and below, given that vampires attack from above and pull you down below a little bit. The Lost Boys, about a family hoping for a fresh start in California town that turns out to have a vampire problem, is nominated for 12 Tony Awards, including for its set, lighting, and sound. It's a big show, in every sense of the word, costly with a $25 million budget, loud with a pop rock score by the Rescues, a spectacle heavy with non-stop motion, much of it automated, involving set pieces and people moving on and off stage, left and right, up and down, with backstage work required to ensure nothing collides. Things evaporate in every direction, said Dane Laffery, the show's Tony-nominated scenic designer. We wanted the space to materialize and dematerialize. The outer set is dark, industrial-looking, and 65 feet high, so when the house, the store, the boardwalk, and the playground that sometimes nest within it are hoisted up or dropped down or tracked aside, the stage becomes the abandoned ironworks that is the vampire's lair. Even a freight elevator is part of the three-tiered set, another element suggesting deep descent. It's awesome. It's vast. It's scary, said Shoshana Bean, nominated for a Tony Award for her portrayal of Lucy, a newly single mother of 2 teenage boys, Michael and Sam, struggling to find their place in the world. We hear noises often, and the space is so big you don't know where it's coming from. I'm often terrified, but the whole show is a massive trust fall. Because the show is about vampires, one effect matters more than all the others. We needed the audience to believe people are flying, Laffery said. It's a feat with a long history. Think of Mary Martin in Peter Pan, and still involves wires and harnesses, though with a lot more technological bells and whistles than there were in the 1950s. Oddly enough, to your head, I've been asked to do flying tricks for a bit now, said Ali Louis Borgazzi, who plays David, the lead vampire, and is a first-time Tony nominee. When I was 12 years old, I did a production of The Seussical in Pittsfield, Mass., and for my number, I had pretty much the same flying rig that I'm in now. Growing up, I had a big fear of heights, he added, but it's been kicked out of me. Bourgois said flying has always required a considerable amount of physical training to build core strength, a lot of safety practice, and regular cold plunges for recovery. It was scary in the beginning, just because of the height aspect, but it's really interesting how your nervous system can get used to anything after a while, he said. Sometimes it genuinely feels like I'm flying. But there's more. Vampires, like bats, sleep upside down, at least in the world of The Lost Boys. That means the actors, for little over a minute, hang by their feet. When we first started doing that, it was pretty intense because all the blood rushes to your head pretty quickly, and it's not really a natural thing your body's used to doing, Borzgai said. But because we've been doing it so much, I just do some deep yoga breaths so my nervous system doesn't freak out. If I just breathe and let my body know it's okay, then sometimes it just feels like a good stretch. The musical diverges from the film in several ways, but one scene was deemed so memorable that it needed to be preserved. The moment when the vampire gang hangs off a railway bridge and then drops into the clouds. In the show, the vampires, untethered, drop off a trestle and fall through an opening in the stage, landing out of sight. You need the bodies to build up enough velocity that it feels like, oh my God, they're literally dropping into an abyss. And if you're sitting in the orchestra and you see them pass out of view, they're continuing to fall pretty far in order to ask for that effect to work for all the people in the theater, Laffrey said. That extra depth was an amazing asset. A sort of padded trampoline at the bottom of the deep orchestra pit breaks their fall. It feels like landing on a cloud, Borzgai said. As in the film, Michael, the older brother, played on stage by L.J. Benet, floats in the clouds after letting go of the bridge. The theater's depth and height can also be seen in less perilous moments. The Vampires Moonlight is a rock band, and one of the most effective uses of the theater's orchestra elevator is to create a mosh pit in which fans of that band can dance. It's one of my favorite moments when they all sink down and suddenly we are there with them, Arden said. I wanted to be able to play with perspective so that we first start with Michael and the group looking toward the audience, and then we drop them down into the mosh pit. They turn around, and it's as if we turned a camera around and we're in the mosh pit. And why so much emphasis on spectacle? We have to create a world that is magical and realistic at the same time, and therefore spectacle always seemed important for this, Arden said. I'm sure one day when there's a revival, there will be an amazing version of the show someone comes up with that uses nothing and is in a black box, but I felt like if you're coming to see a vampire rock musical, you want to see something pretty spectacular. Just 36 hours to air, filming an SNL short. The scramble to create the pre-taped sketches, fake ads, music videos, and so much more has been part of the show since the start. By Austin Considine. Shooting SNL before it's live from New York. On a Friday morning in April, a dozen Saturday Night Live cast members and that week's host, Coleman Domingo, arrived at a Manhattan soundstage with less than a day to film two very different short videos, each with its own set, cast, crew, and technical challenges. Every short is its own new mini-production, and every working week the crew effectively starts from scratch, turning the writers' ideas into television in only a few days. They build new sets, find and fabricate props, design and craft costumes, wigs, and prosthetics. These pre-taped sketches date back in various forms to the first season in 1975 when Albert Brooks was an early contributor. They have always been essential to both its aesthetic and the smooth running of the live production, said Lorne Michaels, the show's creator. We always need to be able to make set changes and costume changes, he explained. The pre-taped skits buy time. They have also made for some of the show's most memorable sketches. Think satirical ads for Happy Fun Ball and Mom Jeans, or music videos like I'm on a Boat and Do It on My Twin Bed. Ahead of the April 11th episode, SNL producers offered a rare behind-the-scenes glimpse of a pre-taped shoot. To an outsider, it felt like barely controlled chaos. In reality, a finely calibrated machine was operating as designed and refined across decades. We're not in the business of saying no, said Jody Mancuso, head of hair and wigs and a 25-year SNL veteran. So we make it happen any way we can. A high-tech fart joke. Even in a pressure cooker like SNL, a good pre-taped sketch must be especially ruthless in its efficiency. There's a concision to the concept that maybe is more important than a live piece, said Eric Kenward, a producer and head writer for SNL. The hook needs to arrive in the first 30 to 45 seconds, he explained, whereas it can be okay for that to take a couple of minutes in a live sketch. Most weeks include 2 pre-tapes, shot concurrently at an Upper West Side studio while rehearsals continued at 30 Rock. Performers jump from set to set and act against body doubles or teleprompters as needed. Even a simple scene, said the director, Mike Diva, can become this crazy puzzle. He added, I can't overstate how funny it is to be talking seriously about my approach to directing, like the art of making a film unit piece and the insane lift it takes from so many extremely talented artists for something that is, at its core, a big dumb fart joke. On that Friday, Diva was directing a 3.5-minute sketch called Beastomorphs, an effects-heavy spoof in which 4 shape-shifting high school kids, played by Sarah Sherman, Tommy Brennan, Marcelo Hernandez, and Veronica Slowakowska, battle an alien warlord played by Domingo. By 11:30 a.m., the weekly clock was already running short. In a makeup and costuming room, Sherman sat getting her head prosthetically altered for the segment in which Sherman's character sneezes and farts simultaneously while morphing from a frog into a human. She gets stuck in between. Sherman, who co-wrote the segment, had pitched the idea unsuccessfully to other hosts before. Domingo, however, responded well to, like, every weird sketch, she said. Beastomorphs was based on a series of children's sci-fi books from the late 90s and 2000s called Animorphs, and its low-budget TV adaptation. The Animorphs aesthetic was not sophisticated, which Sherman said was part of the appeal. It's a weird balance to strike because we're making fun of the bad CGI from this 90s show, she said. The effects had to look bad on purpose. To create the frog face, big wide-set eyes, giant frog mouth, Louis Zakarian, head of makeup, made an enlarged version of Sherman's head using a prosthetic mold. In post-production, it would effectively be a green screen for the digital distortions. All cast and host heads are digitally scanned and 3D printed, more efficient than the plaster casting Zakarian used to do. Late in the sketch, Domingo's warlord falls for the frog girl, but it is a doomed romance. When Sherman's character turns back into a frog, the warlord freaks out and stomps her. In early takes, Domingo bellowed in fear. Then he tried it more like the scream of a 9-year-old girl, he said. The crew cracked up. The SNL film units have seen the biggest names in comedy come through their soundstage, which makes them a great early testing ground. They're the best audience because they're the most honest, Domingo said. They do not have to laugh because they have another job to do, right? They're working on hanging lights and painting sets. Meanwhile, at a fake barber shop, as the Beastomorphs shoot continued, a short order called Unique Cuts Barbershop taped on the other stage. It had a cast of 7 and it required the speedy construction of an ersatz barbershop. The sketch was about a black barbershop that offered a radically new alternative to mental health treatment for white guys. The Unique Cuts sketch, which starred Domingo, Brennan, Mikey Day, Ben Marshall, Cam Patterson, Kenan Thomas, and Jane Wickline, required plenty of wigs, like many SNL sketches. This show has an in-house wig shop at 30 Rock and keeps more than 3,000 wigs there. New wigs take at least 80 hours to make, so Mancuso relies on existing ones for the pre-tapes and modifies them as needed. Thompson, the SNL stalwart, appeared in Unique Cuts between rehearsals back at 30 Rock. Shout out to the wig department for always finding a new do, he said as a hairstylist peeled the wig off his forehead. Because this guy definitely exists. Gray dreads pulled back into an up pony. It can't always be afros. The build sets are a marvel of ingenuity, teamwork, and efficiency. Andrea Pergelati, a production designer, said she and her colleagues don't know which sketches might air until Wednesday afternoon and don't truly start drafting until about 10 p.m. that night. Construction begins late Thursday afternoon. The barbershop set for Unique Cuts was considerably more elaborate than that of Beastomorphs. Decorators got clippers and scissors from a barber supply store in Irvington, New Jersey. They rented wall art from a local prop house. The graphics team created portraits of Barack Obama, Shaquille O'Neal, Jesse Jackson, and others. Barber chairs were rented from a Long Island prop house. Costuming takes a similar scramble. On Wednesday nights, Jill Bream, who oversees it for the pre-tape units, begins what she called a costume design triage, determining what's in stock, what can be modified, what to buy. For the barber jackets, her team called barbershops and beauty suppliers until they found the right ones. Then the in-house graphics team designed a Unique Cuts logo, and the jackets were sent to an outside vendor for embroidery. The jackets were ready by Thursday afternoon. Michael Che, who wrote Unique Cuts with assistance from Carl Tart, observed the shoot from behind the cameras. The production was more fluid and faster paced than that of a typical TV set. The segment director, Chris Werner, kept the cameras rolling as he called out directions, and the performers adjusted, tweaking and improvising on the fly. Che offered notes. Patterson, who played a barber, said the freewheeling approach helped him find the magic. "I've been in a barbershop my entire life," he said, "so I was just going on what Che and Carl put on paper, but, playing around with it a little bit." After the director yelled cut, a woman brought a platter of cupcakes. It was Patterson's 27th birthday, and everyone sang happy birthday as he blew out the candles. "Now the black version," he shouted, and people joined him in Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday. At exactly 1:59 p.m., the assistant director called out, "That's lunch," a full minute ahead of schedule. Domingo was whisked out the door by his handlers. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The Q. I am a Washington-based reporter at the New York Times who writes about billionaires for the politics and business sections. Despite my job yucking it up with the rich and famous, I have very lowbrow taste. Sorry. Here's a quick tour of my diet by Theodore Schliefer. Museum under the Gateway Arch. Places. I'm trying to visit all 63 U.S. national parks, 45 down, and amazingly, the Gateway Arch in St. Louis is one, so I had to book a gratuitous trip. The museum beneath the arch reveals the history of this beleaguered city, the West, and the arch's construction. Going up the monument is a claustrophobic and worthy experience. Pressbox Podcast. This show from Brian Curtis is perfectly in my sweet spot, all about the business and culture of media with a heavy emphasis on the world of sports. The elevation of Joel Anderson to co-host has made it that much stronger, and I have to pause and remember that I don't actually know these people. The Secret Life of Groceries, books. It is weird that I love grocery shopping, and yet I have never truly marveled at its magic until poring through this investigation of the supermarket. I gravitate towards narrative nonfiction and love a journalism book that teaches me a thing or two about reporting, even in my off time. Parker York Smith, TikTok. I can't wait to grow silver hair as good as this guy's, but his colorful outfits are attainable. Not that I'd wear them, but I'd look at them and I'd take them as inspo for the much, much smaller number of items in my own closet. The Great Divide, albums. This Noah Kahan album goes down smoothly. I've had Dashboard, Dan, and Haircut on repeat at the gym, on cross-country flights, and while writing. Left Us for the New York Times is a lyric on Haircut. I'm in a very pop-girly phase era, and Noah is the only male vocalist who can make the cut alongside Olivia, Sabrina, and Gracie. Paul McCartney replays his past. A new album revels in his memories of making music, by John Pareles. For Paul McCartney, songwriting isn't only a job, a craft, and an emotional outlet. It's a compulsion and a craving. People say, "Well, why do you still write songs?" And it's just because I love it. I'm addicted, he said in an interview at Boulevard Carol, a warren of recording and rehearsal studios on Manhattan's far west side, where McCartney, 83, had just wrapped up an afternoon of band practice for the season finale of Saturday Night Live. Out of a black hole comes forth milk and honey, and it's so great, the feeling. Prolific as he has been, Through the Beatles, Wings, and solo albums, McCartney doesn't follow any songwriting discipline or routine. I'll just be somewhere and with some time to spare, and my guitar will be there, and I'll be near a piano, and the urge will take me, he said. Whenever I've hit something, it's just like, ooh, wow, it's a great feeling. You know, the whole creative thing is a great thing. I say it beats working. Even for a rehearsal, McCartney was nattily dressed. He sported a blue jacket, a black shirt with pink pin dots, black pants, white-soled shoes like karate slippers, and socks with psychedelic design of blue bubbles beneath a yellow stripe. A few days afterward, McCartney would perform on SNL, playing old and new songs including Days We Left Behind from his new album, The Boys of Dungeon Lane. Then, 5 days later, McCartney was a surprise final guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert on stage at the Ed Sullivan Theater, where the Beatles made their North American debut in 1964. As a musical finale for Colbert, he sang the Beatles song, Hello Goodbye. In person, McCartney carries his 6 decades of fame with extraordinary grace. He's genial and unpretentious, proud but not arrogant, and still amazed and delighted at his life as a musician. I wonder these days at how I ended up as a songwriter, he mused, because, I'm just some kid who went to school, went to the careers master who said to me, you haven't got qualifications and I don't see a great future for you. So I had to take that and just sort of think, sod you, I'm going to do something. And it made me work for success harder because I wasn't supposed to be successful. So writing songs was one of the great things about my growing up. The first song he wrote was a rockabilly-flavored tune, I Lost My Little Girl, McCartney recalled. Someone pointed out to me later, that was about losing your mom. I wrote it at about 14, 15 years old, and she had died quite recently. Although the Beatles didn't record the song, McCartney would later unveil it in the 1970s with Wings. This is an interesting thing about songs, he said. Without knowing it, you're delving into stuff that maybe would be difficult to talk about. On The Boys of Dungeon Lane, many of McCartney's new songs revisit his childhood in Liverpool and the earliest days of the Beatles. In Down South, he recalls getting to know John Lennon as they hitchhiked south to London. Ringo Starr joined McCartney to sing and play drums in the Home to Us about their unglamorous hometown. McCartney made the album with Andrew Watt, a Grammy-winning producer who was recorded with the Rolling Stones, Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, Iggy Pop, and Pearl Jam. It's incredible to watch Paul work, Watt said in a phone interview. You talk about your 10,000 hours. He's got 1,000,000 hours of making records and recording. So his ability to understand microphones and how to arrange, how to write, how to play every single instrument is just incredible. And he has so much fun when he plays. He's bouncing around the room, bouncing between each instrument, dancing and laughing. It's really a joyous experience working with him. Chad Smith, the Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer who was a late fill-in for the SNL performance, was similarly effusive. I don't have enough adjectives to tell you how incredible it was, Smith said in a telephone interview. He kept saying, just make it fun. He doesn't have to play anymore if he doesn't want to, and he doesn't have to make records. It's so inspiring to see the energy. He truly loves it. For McCartney, collaborating with Watt opened up memories. When you're working with a younger producer, it encourages me to unpack all my stories, McCartney said, mainly the Beatles, because that was the first thing when we were kids, and those kinds of memories, I think, for most people, are the most precious. The Boys of Dungeon Lane also exalts in McCartney's lifelong musical playfulness. Its opening track, As You Lie There, explodes from cozy reminiscence into McCartney's Little Richard scream. Never Know turns psychedelic with nonsense lyric vocals in the counterpoint and a majestic final build-up. Salesman Saint, a song about McCartney's parents surviving World War II in Liverpool with laughter in a song, moves through shifting meters and suddenly sprouts swinging big band horns. Lately, McCartney's memories have been rematerializing. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland has just opened an exhibition devoted to Wings, McCartney's hit-making 1970s band. He provided some costumes and artifacts, but not his violin-shaped Hofner bass. "I can't give them my bass because I'm using it today," he said. In London, the former Apple headquarters building at 3 Savile Row will reopen as a museum. Fans will be able to visit the reconstructed basement studio where the Beatles recorded Let It Be and the rooftop where the band gave its last brief performance. "Museum implies dust," McCartney said. "I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's going to be quite lively." Dungeon Lane, which is mentioned in Days We Left Behind, is a road in Liverpool that leads to the shore of the Mersey River, where McCartney enjoyed birdwatching. It was also where local toughs lurked, and one day robbed him of his watch. "When you write things, you write something and it becomes a metaphor for more than what you're putting down," he said, and quoted the song's lyrics. "Some of them will feel the pain, but some were meant for more. Some were meant for more is us, the guys who got out." However, he continued, "I know loads of boys of Dungeon Lane who didn't make it. You know, a lot of my friends are the ones who didn't make great success of their careers." The song also mentions 20 Forthland Road in Liverpool, the house, now a property of Britain's National Trust, where McCartney and Lennon began their writing partnership. "We nearly always sat together on 2 acoustic guitars and just threw ideas at each other and bounced off each other," McCartney said. "Looking back on it, I couldn't have looked for a better partner." He added, "John had a much harder edge, which I liked a lot. When we were working together, it was very inspiring, very useful to have that kind of edge. And I think possibly it was good for him to have something less hard, something maybe a little bit more romantic. It's just my way, you know. I'm that kind of person. I like certain things that some people might just sniff at and say, 'Oh my God, that is so corny.'" But at times, he has also felt misunderstood. "It's funny how you get stereotyped," he said. "Being called the cute one in the Beatles, that was like the worst insult you could give me. I really didn't like that. It's like, no, I'm more than that. But it is also true that if I'm writing a song, I do like to have that sort of loving element. But to offset that, I often find that something a bit more realistic creeps in. I like the mix of the two." His melodic gift can hide his darker moments. When I asked which of his lesser-known songs he's fond of, he cited Daytime, Nighttime Suffering and Arrow Through Me, 2 Wings songs from the 1970s that are not only full of musical twists, but also harbor troubled thoughts. McCartney revisited his old studio methods while making the new album. During one corporate reorganization of EMI, the Beatles' longtime label, its accountants decided to sell off equipment from its Abbey Road studio. McCartney bought many of the instruments, among them the Mellotron he used on Strawberry Fields, the Spinet piano he played on Because, and a 4-track Studer tape recorder that may have been the one used to record Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, though McCartney has been unable to document whether it is the exact machine. He still uses the vintage gear. One new track, We Two, a fond song about love, partnership, and mutual support and respect, was entirely recorded to tape on the Studer. Current computer technology offers an infinite number of tracks that can be tweaked at any time, but when making Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles had to mix down multiple instruments into one unchangeable track again and again. "We really used the process that he used in the Beatles, like 100%, Watt said, down to a final edit cutting the tape with a razor blade." We Two ends with the sound of a tape rewinding, a vanishing sound in the digital era. "We just stuck that on because no one hears that," McCartney said. "You used to hear it on every record you ever made." When McCartney began writing with Lennon, they had no way to record songs in progress, but they reasoned, "If you can't remember it, how do you expect people to remember it?" McCartney said. "So we let it be our rule." You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Now, of course, he can capture musical ideas on a cell phone. He He pulled out his iPhone and scrolled through all recordings, dozens of pages of possibilities. L.A. Melody. What was this? He said, as stately piano chords came out of the tiny speaker. He played another, a lurching mellotron loop with a reverb-laden guitar chords and the beginning of a lyric. It was one of what he called his green songs, which may one day populate an album. When we were doing the album, we separated things into 3 categories, he said. One were the red songs, and these were songs that we're going to use, and those are pretty much the ones that made the album. Then the blue songs, which are ones that could have made the album, but just got pushed aside. And then there's the green ones, and that's these ones that are experimental. I've got complete freedom, and I ended up really liking those songs. McCartney is no longer concerned with making hits. In attempting to be creative, it's good if a lot of people like it, he said, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's nowhere near as important to me as it was to some people. I like freedom, and if the freedom leads to a hit, great. If the freedom leads to just me enjoying it, probably even greater. What matters for him now is simply making music. It's a magical world, music, McCartney said. Scientifically even, it's just a bunch of frequencies. So how can these frequencies affect your heart? I get it. If it's got a lyric, sometimes you go, oh yeah. But if it's just a melody, how can that make you cry? That's magic. I love it. As the interview ended, McCartney stood in the doorway watching as 2 studio employees bustled in opposite directions. He smiled. Hello, goodbye, he said. Streaming. Darkness Finds Its Way In by Scott Tobias. An Oscar-nominated performance by Timothée Chalamet, a 1990s classic from Olivier Assayas, Errol Morris's bioepic about Stephen Hawking, and a macabre father-daughter horror flick are all available to watch now on HBO Max. Marty Supreme, 2025. Josh Safdie's follow-up to Uncut Gems, the burning ulcer of a gambling thriller he made with his brother Benny, carries much of the same relentless energy and urban flavor. But Timothée Chalamet's performance as a 50s table tennis maestro who charms and scams his way to tournaments from London to Tokyo has a roguish buoyancy that carries Marty Supreme as he seeks the superstar treatment from a marginal sport. New York faces like Abel Ferrara and Kevin O'Leary make a difference, too, along with Gwyneth Paltrow's casting as a former movie star. Our critic, Manohla Dargis, called it one of the most thoroughly pleasurable American movies of the year. Game Night, 2018. As a married couple that thrives on hyper-competitive rounds of bar trivia and Pictionary, Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams bring a robust energy to this inspired studio comedy about a murder mystery party that turns unexpectedly real. Game Night gets plenty of mileage out of the slow realization that Bateman's shady brother-in-law, Kyle Chandler, has led everyone into actual danger. But the film wins on the margins too, especially with Jesse Plemons' scene-stealing performance as the divorced cop next door who never got invited over. Glenn Kenny, who wrote the film, is a reminder that McAdams is one of cinema's most accomplished and appealing comic actresses. Eyes Without a Face, 1962. There are elements of the classic monster movie embedded in George Franju's elegant thriller about a doctor's Frankenstein-like efforts to graft another person's skin onto his daughter's disfigured face. Pierre Brasseur stars as the doctor, who, along with his trusted assistant, Alay Valley, kidnaps young women to his estate for the sinister experimental endeavor. But the macabre business of Eyes Without a Face is complicated by a father's guilt and the haunting ghostly image of his daughter hiding behind a featureless mask. There's nothing in the horror genre quite like it. Stephen Holded credited the film for sustaining an atmosphere of sinister obsession. Irma Vep, 1996. One of the great movies about making movies. Olivier Assayas' ingenious, ultra-cool cult classic acts as a barometer of the French film industry in the late 20th century and finds it both creatively and institutionally bereft. Appearing as herself, Maggie Cheung arrives in Paris to play the lead role in a remake of Les Vampires. The silent, crime serial from the mid-teens, now revived by a long-in-the-tooth director, played by the French New Wave legend Jean-Pierre Léaud. As the production spins out of control, Chung's increasing sense of confusion and alienation causes her to turn inward, leading to an unforgettable sequence in which she dons her character's latex catsuit and stalks her hotel. A Brief History of Time, 1991. After reinventing the crime documentary with the Thin Blue Line a few years earlier, the director Errol Morris pushed biographical nonfiction into new realms with A Brief History of Time, his mesmeric treatment of the best-selling book by physicist Stephen Hawking. Given only a few days' access to Hawking, whose neuromuscular disease limited him to messages spoken through his voice box, Morris took creative license in using cinematic tools to make connections between Hawking's life and work. It turns out that astrophysics makes more sense when illustrated with clips from the black hole and images of a Rolex floating over a space vortex. Vincent Canby called it the kind of adventure that seldom reaches the screen, and it's a tonic. An opera revives, then thrives. Anthony Roth Costanzo took the helm at Philadelphia Opera when bankruptcy was near. By Joshua Barone. Anthony Roth Costanzo was explaining the idea of an exquisite corpse, the surrealistic party game in which artists blindly collaborate to create an image, no one knowing what the others are doing. The results can be hilariously bizarre, but sometimes they're miraculous. Tonight's opera is a living, breathing, exquisite corpse. Costanzo, the general director and president of the Opera Philadelphia, told an audience at the Academy of Music earlier this year, and you are going to be the first to experience it. Costanzo was introducing Complications in Sue, a vehicle for the cabaret doyen Justin Vivian Bond. Told in 10 scenes, it was written by 10 composers with as much isolation and unpredictability as those surrealist sketchers. It promised to be, as the company's slogan for the season goes, opera, but different. It could have been a mess, but instead it was one of the most fascinating, exhilarating, and even moving opera productions of the year. Costanzo, who had commissioned the show and assembled its many parts with daunting speed, later said he felt some pride that night and thought to himself, "This is what you can do in this role." Balancing his job with a full-time career as a countertenor, Costanzo is still getting settled in at Opera Philadelphia. He just concluded his second season there. But in that time, he has channeled his characteristically tirelessness and daring-do into reversing the company's financial crisis. If he can keep up the momentum, he may even be able to usher in a kind of golden age, too. "I'm thrilled to see Opera Philadelphia thriving again," said Renee Orth, who contributed a scene to the Complications in Sue, and served as the company's composer in residence before Costanzo's arrival. "I'm excited to see what Anthony is doing. He's really a visionary." Costanzo, 44, has long been known as resourceful. As an undergraduate at Princeton University, he gathered enough money to produce a movie by hitting up different departments at the school. He also got the film director James Ivory involved. He has produced his own theatrical recitals and brought in collaborators like the artist George Condo and the designer Rafe Simmons and actor Tilda Swinton. At the Metropolitan Opera, he has strategized with the company's marketing and press departments by day and performed on stage by night. When he took over Opera Philadelphia before the 24-5 season, it was on a path to bankruptcy. "We had 12 weeks to raise $4 million, Costanzo said, or that was it. The program was already set, and he didn't want to cancel any of it. Nor should he have. Opera Philadelphia has a rich recent history under David B. Devan's leadership of productions and new works at the cutting edge. First up that season, for example, was the American premiere of Missy Mazzoli and Royce Vavrick's unsettling and brilliant The Listeners. Mark Scora, who had retired from his decades-long post as president and chief executive of Opera America last fall, said that while Opera Philadelphia's experimental reputation brought in some great media coverage, it didn't work financially. Anthony inherited a company that had done a lot, he added, but it was fragile. When Costanzo started, the company had a budget of $11 million, was $4 million in debt, and had sold only 30% of this coming season's tickets. For my first year, he said, we were about 3 weeks away from stopping payroll at any point, so it was just a constant race to cover that. Through what he called creative fundraising, Costanzo ended his first year with a $1.5 million surplus. He started a comprehensive campaign with the goal to raise $33 million in 3 years. As of now, it has brought in $27.6 million. When a former donor whose Philadelphia apartment had been on the market for 2 years gifted it to the company, Costanzo took out a $500,000 loan against it, stayed there whenever in town, and then after 18 months sold it for more than the value of the loan. In his most sensational early move, he created Pick Your Price, a ticketing system that lowered the cost of admission to as little as $11. The entire 2024-25 season sold out within weeks. More recently, the company introduced Opera Pass, a monthly or annual membership that allows early access to Pick Your Price seats. 42% of those in the program bought tickets to every production. From Costanzo's first season to the next, he doubled the number of performances, expanded Opera Philadelphia's board, and set up a reserve fund, which is more liquid than an endowment. Now, he said, we may be 4 months away from stopping payroll. Costanzo is not a career arts administrator, nor does he have a business school degree. The biggest qualification I have is that my parents are both psychologists, he said, and psychology is most of his work. One miscalculation in fundraising generally is, we're doing this great thing, you should support it. My approach is very much, what are you interested in? What are you looking to achieve? And how can I make what I'm doing do that for you? That same approach, he added, has proved essential in union negotiations as well as developing partnerships with other institutions. He is programmed with the Rodin Museum and worked with the developers T.F. Cornerstone to produce performances around the famous organ in the Wanamaker Building. With the Four Seasons, he put together a pricey evening of food and music at Jean-Georges, Philadelphia. Through Temple University, Opera Philadelphia will be able to release commercial recordings of Complications Ensue and its other premiere of the season, Gregory Spears' Sleepers Awake. I think, Orth said of Costanzo, that he's very aware that Philadelphia is really proud of Philadelphia and that the Opera Philadelphia is a Philadelphia company. So far, Costanzo has also maintained his singing career. He regularly took Opera Philadelphia in France while starring in a new production of Philip Glass's Satagrana at Paris Opera. I have never enjoyed singing more, he said, because every other second is so full and being on stage is so liberating and beautiful. He also announced that he had somehow found time to write a book, Countertenor, which Farrar, Straus, and Giroux will publish in October, accompanied by an album of the same name from Nonesuch. If Opera Philadelphia has fallen short, it has been in the work itself. Even Costanzo has acknowledged that the company has had failures. It has a talented musical director, Corrado Rivaris, and a skilled chorus, and Costanzo's been able to enlist artists from his circle of collaborators in the American Modern Opera Company, like the vocalist Devon Tynes and the director Zach Wincor. Still, the 5 productions of this season were mixed at best. There was admirable ambition and an adventurous aesthetic in Domenico Micheletti's staging of Il Adagio di Rem, but not the high level of artistry needed to support or even lift its vision. Costanzo performed with the company in December in a Vivaldi pasticcio about climate crisis called The Seasons. The artists like Wincor the choreographer Pam Tanowitz, and the playwright Sarah Rule involved, it had a lot of potential, but ended up being a confusing and thin slog. Complications was the real triumph of the season, revealing Michael R. Jackson, better known in the theater world as a writer worthy of the next great libretto. And among the composers were artists deserving of larger commissions. Andy Hakio, for example, and Alistair Coleman and Cecile McLaurin Salvant Bond, in a parade of costumes by Jonathan Anderson, was joined by 4 excellent shape-shifting singers. Spears' Sleepers Awake put a hypnotic spin on the Sleeping Beauty tale, showcasing the company's chorus. And the season ended on a high with The Black Clown, an adaptation of Langston Hughes' monologue starring Tynes, who was the creator of the show, with infectious music by Michael Schachter, clever direction by Winkar, and invigorating choreography by Chanel de Silva. A work of restless curiosity, passion, and sheer charisma, its overwhelming force has only continued to gather since its premiere 7 years ago. This season, 60% of the audience members were first-time ticket buyers. On Instagram, one of them posted a photo of the curtain call at Complications and wrote, "Opera is crazy, dog." Costanzo found that price made a difference to a degree. "In my head, I thought it was, I've always wanted to come to the opera, but I could never afford it," he said. "That is not the answer. What I realized is actually much better, which is, I didn't know the tickets were $11, and I thought we'd try it." And that's where you get people. Recently, Opera Philadelphia announced its 2026-27 season, the first that Costanzo has planned without scrambling and calling in favors. It's a blend of familiar and fresh, of traditional and experimental. Mozart's Rarity, Mithridate, Re da Ponto, and Verdi's Aida, but also the local premiere of Courtney Bryan's new opera, Suddenly Last Summer, the world premiere of Luke Stiles and Alan McKendrick's sitcom, and a staging of the Gershwins' Let Them Eat Cake, a presidential satire not so lightly pointed at the Trump administration. Skorka said he saw the season lineup as seeking a balance, attracting media attention and new audiences while pleasing traditional donors who could just as easily ride a train up to New York to see something like Aida on a grand scale at the Metropolitan Opera. "I'd be curious to see how they do it," he added. One detail about the rollout was hard to ignore. The news release headline, Anthony Roth Costanzo announces Opera Philadelphia's 2026-2027 season, placed Costanzo's name before the company's. However, unintentionally, it harked back to the days when Beverly Sills, another big artist personality, was running New York City Opera in its prime. "I did not make that decision for the record," Costanzo said, "but I did see it. At this stage, though, it makes sense. His network of fellow artists and deep-pocketed supporters has been crucial to the company's drastic turnaround. Most performances open with a carnival barker introducing by Costanzo. During the NFL season, he even came out in an Eagles jersey. Putting a face to Opera Philadelphia, he has established a relationship with the audiences, which could be the envy of his peers across the country. I was able to mobilize people I knew in a different way because my personal brand, if I can talk about it that way, has a certain value," Costanzo said. "But what I'm keenly aware of is that I'm trying to create a sustainable model for this company, and that means it cannot hinge entirely on me. It has to transfer to the brand, and that's a process." You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. A Tale of Shoplifters Told by Scene Stealers. The cast of I Love Boosters mixes comedy with big ideas, by Sandra E. Garcia. In I Love Boosters, the latest outsized comedic provocation from Boots Riley, sorry to bother you, everyone is looking for a way out of something. A job, a uniform, the trappings of a toxic relationship. Everyone is trying to crack the code of a system that they are a cog in. While the word booster is a slang term for a shoplifter, in the film it can also be seen as a method to propel oneself out of that broken system. In telling its story of strivers who shoplift the clothing of high fashion designer Demi Moore, the movie employs surreal and abstract methods, including some sci-fi metaphysics and even some claymation. But it's grounded by the performances from its ensemble of women who make their struggles feel real amid the madness. That includes Keke Palmer, who plays Corvette, an aspiring designer and the lead of the shoplifting crew called the Velvet Gang. Taylor Page as Mariah, and Naomi Ackie as Sade, rounding out the initial Velvet Gang trio. Poppy Liu, Jihu, a Chinese activist working for better conditions in sweatshops back home, and Isa Gonzalez, Violetta, a Latino activist who often implores the shoplifting gang to go for more than just clothes. Earlier this month, 4 of the cast members, Palmer, Page, Lee, and Gonzalez, gathered at the New York Times for a lively conversation about how they turned weighty issues into comedy and how they navigate online criticism. These are edited excerpts from the conversation. What was it like to work as an ensemble on Boosters, a film that has so many different twists where you all have to stay together through them? Taylor Page: Well, I couldn't get a word in edgewise, as you can see. I just wanted to say that, no, it could be so much fun. We bounced off each other's energy. Poppy Liu: It really was giving like early pop summer camp. Ida Gonzalez: Keke determined a tone and an energy on set. She's a star, but when we say star, it's not like a diva. She's like the leader. Page: It was already on the page, and I think we all obviously responded to it, but Riley creates this world, and then you bring it. Keke Palmer: I feel like he also let us expose in these characters the way that we're all surviving, what it means to be under capitalism. Poppy's character is like, I'm a straightforward activist. Taylor is like, I'm going to find the fun and joy. I'm going to be in Fantasyland because that's safe for me. Naomi is like, look, I got to worry about my kids and make sure they're all right. My character is structured and I'm going to strategize my way to the top. Lou: The themes are big, but every character, their objective is actually so close to home and human. They're not thinking of themselves as revolutionary. Jiahu is such an activist, but she doesn't think of herself as that. You're just living your life and your circumstances based on your own world. She has to be an activist in real time just because she sees people around her suffering and is like, I want to do what I can to change it, which ultimately is what activism is. How do you approach this material that looks down the throat of capitalism and fashion while also being part of an industry driven by capitalist instincts? Palmer: There's a running joke in the movie where we keep saying nuance, nuance, and that's how it feels. It's like an Andy Warhol painting. There's tons of commentary on pop culture, but he also is pop culture. Page: We all love fashion, appreciate it, respect it. It employs people. It's aspirational. It's beautiful to be surrounded by luxury. Like, who doesn't want that? But in the end, on the backs of who? Palmer: It's so true. There's so much in the world that's good that comes with it. I mean, even this. She picks up her iPhone. This is a revolutionary product, but who made it and what did they have to go through to make it? Gonzalez: Nirvana is never going to exist. The movie is about bringing up awareness on a lot of subject matters. Palmer: It's actually critiquing the contradiction that lies in capitalism. Lou: Maybe it's not dismantling the whole system. That can't be done necessarily in our lifetime, or who knows how many lifetimes, but you can make the corner of your world a little bit better. The Velvet Gang is a group of women of color in which one is looking to get her designs out, but Christy Smith, Demi Moore, steals them. The others are looking for their own justice as well. How did you use your roles to depict the injustices that plague your characters' communities in real life? Palmer: I mean, it was as easy as 1, 2, 3 because it happens all the time. In the last few years, we've had a crazy thing with Black Lives Matter movement in terms of not necessarily the movement itself, but like Black lives being literally murdered right in front of us. We had actual places, salons being shot up, where people are actively having Asian hate. We had a president literally send hate towards the Chinese community. And then we have actual Latino community Mexican, Honduran, Guatemalan, everything being picked up from the streets. It's very easy to tap into. It's like right in front of you. There's also a romance aspect in the movie. Lakeith Stanfield plays the somewhat vampiric love interest of Corvette. What significance did you find in the context of the movie's themes? Palmer. Under this capitalism, under feeling this pressure, we unfortunately are finding recognition in pain and suffering before we are in our actual embodied selves. I think sometimes these connections are unfortunately happening. They're not happening from a state of freedom, they're happening from a state of oppression. When someone is meeting you at your lowest or you're unfulfilled, they're not really meeting you. She, Corvette, is afraid of him because he's validating the dark side of her. Page. I thought there was levity to it, even though it's quite serious. Gonzalez. You just want to be seen so badly. It's like this experience of trying to be seen and then revealing yourself. That act is the most revealing, and then someone's sucking the life out of you. The feedback of the movie has gotten, on mostly social media, is that it promotes stealing because it's a heist movie. What do you have to say to people who see the movie so flatly? Palmer. We ain't for those people, you know what I'm saying? It gets to a point where everything ain't for everybody. These are the people that probably don't even believe in what the movie is about, so it's like you don't really care. Gonzalez. Give yourself a chance to watch and see what you take out of the movie. Page. To profess your art is a sacrifice because it doesn't always mean that people are going to feel you, but at least have decorum when you disagree. It's really hard to make a movie. It's really hard to have thoughts. It's really hard to put things on the page and have originality. That's the win. And it's okay to disagree. But let's bring back critical thinking because it's not about being able to think critically that is actually the real threat. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, May 31st, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. We read from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section every Sunday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Jean. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability